All right, welcome back, Money Master Podcast. This is Psychology of Money. Morgan Housel. We are finishing up today, and grab your book.
Well, this is the first time that we've done a book club, or we've gone through a book together on the podcast. I think it was great. We chose a good one.
Yeah.
We've had a lot of people chime in and say they've really enjoyed the book and gone and grabbed their own copy. And we are at our last two chapters.
Yeah. And there's plenty of financial books you couldn't do a book club on. So
This
is a good pick.
You'd find my head on the table.
Well, I will say, if you enjoyed listening to this so far, let us know in the comments, because we need to know if this stuff helps people. We hear a lot of good things about it, but if you want to hear, there's other books that Morgan has done that are fantastic, or there's some other books that we could do on to be great for you.
Another book club.
All right, so looking at chapter 18 right now, and it starts off talking about an alien. He says, imagine an alien dispatched to Earth, and his job is to keep tabs on our economy. And actually, before we go there, let's just kind of tell you the backstory before I tell you about this story. It says, when you'll believe anything, appealing fictions, and why stories are more powerful than statistics, meaning we'll believe stories. So he says, imagine an alien dispatched to Earth, and his job is to keep tabs on our economy. And it basically starts flying over New York City, and it's right around, let's say, 2007 or 2009. And he kind of notices that everything seems like there's, happy party goers on New Year's Eve at Times Square in 2007. And he kind of sees that there's, big billboards, and there's fireworks, and there's TV cameras, and it looks about the same everywhere he goes. And then everywhere he goes all over the United States, it kind of sees people going to work to their factories. Everybody's kind of happy. And then he also notices the same thing in 2008 and 2009. But then the story goes, if he gets closer, he actually realizes that during the same time, he's actually shocked to find out that U.S. households are about $16 trillion poorer than in 2009 than they were in 2007. And then he looks at the numbers, and he's just shocked that, that there's such a struggle happening on. He's dumbfounded that 10 million more Americans are unemployed. And then he's in disbelief when he learns that the stock market is worth half of what it was 2 years before. And so he kind of starts saying, like, the moral of his story was there's things that look to be okay, but in reality, what was really happening, right? And he kind of says a lot of it was based on the stories we were telling ourselves about what should happen. In fact, he says there's one change the alien couldn't see between 2007 and 2009, and that is the stories we told ourselves about the economy. In 2007, we told a story about the stability of housing prices, the prudence of bankers, and the ability of financial markets to accurately price risk. But in 2009, we stopped believing that story, and that's the only thing that changed. But it made all the difference in the world. Stories are more powerful than reality sometimes, or the statistics.
Yeah. They're what shape, what choices you make.
Yeah.
Is what you're believing about, what the future is going to hold.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, it's not the first time that you tell yourself a certain story that you believe it, right? I think you have to hear it over and over and over again. So you're hearing it through social media, you're hearing it through news, you're hearing it through your neighbors, and your perspective will begin to shift. Oh,
yeah.
Like I've heard that 4 times now.
It's really are changing.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So it's not like it's happening overnight or immediately.
Right. Well, and then on page 197, he says, everyone has an incomplete view of the world, but we form a complete narrative to fill in the gaps. So like the alien, everything looks fine, but there's information that if you dig it deeper, you're missing. But not everybody either knows that information or knows how to get that information. And so they just start filling in what makes them feel like, okay, I have a good complete story here about what's happening.
Yeah.
When maybe they don't. They're missing some key details.
And sometimes some people will believe a story so much, like they are, like, believe it 100%, right? And like, there's someone I'm thinking of, they told me this story, and I'm thinking, that's not right. I don't believe that. And, you're like, where are you getting your information from? Because I feel the complete opposite. So we get ourselves to believe something that may not necessarily be completely true. Where are we getting the information from?
Page 195 says that it talks about mutual funds, and this is something that people have believed for a long time that is not necessarily accurate. He says people believe in financial quackery in a way that they never would for, say, weather quackery, because the rewards for correctly predicting what the stock market will do next week are in a different universe than the rewards for predicting weather, if it's going to be sunny or rainy next week. He says, consider that 85% of active mutual funds underperformed their benchmark over the 10 years ending in 2018. He says that figure has been fairly stable for generations. And you would think that an industry with such poor performance would be a niche service and have a hard time staying in business, but there's almost $5 trillion invested into these funds. Give someone the chance of investing alongside the next Warren Buffett, quote unquote, and they'll believe with such faith that millions of people will put their life savings behind it. So talking about mutual funds, it's like a known fact that, in fact, I think Vanguard did studies on this for a long time too, saying like 8 out of 10 actively managed mutual funds do not outperform their index, which, could be represented in an exchange traded fund. And yet people, keep putting money into these higher cost, actively managed mutual funds, believing, because they created a story, that it's probably better, right? And it's hard to believe that just the majority is wrong or can't be wrong.
Well, and that's probably partially what we were talking about filling in a gap. Like, they may not think, I don't know how to actively trade stocks, but people are telling me these are good. I'm just going to have to go with it, right? That's the gap they're filling in, is I'm going to go this way.
Right.
Because that's what I know.
Right. I mean, even academics say, well, like the continued education is still kind of outdated, and it says, the benefit of a mutual fund is you get a money manager for people who can't afford a money manager. It's like, and you get a basket of stocks, so you're diversifying away risk. It's like, okay, those things are true, but that's like literally a partial story, because since the mutual fund, exchange traded funds have been invented, and it doesn't require that actively traded mutual fund, manager. It doesn't require that middleman, right? We're not advocating for one type of investment or another. We're talking about the story here. He also goes on to talk about Madoff. He says, take Madoff, for example. In hindsight, his Ponzi scheme should have been obvious. I mean, he reported returns that never varied. They were audited by a relatively unknown accounting firm, and he refused to release much information on how the returns were achieved. Yet Madoff raised billions of dollars for some of the most sophisticated investors in the world. He told a good story, and people wanted to believe it.
Yeah. Yep. I remember watching that movie and just being in shock, right? Like, you can't see it when you're in it, but watching the movie, you're like, wow.
You're talking about the Netflix documentary
the
Madoff?
Documentary,
Madoff,
yeah. We all watched that and we were like, what was he thinking? Because we can see it after the fact, right? Like, what in the world?
Yeah.
On page 199, he writes, think about market forecasts. We're very, very bad at them. I once calculated that if you just assume that the market goes up every year by its historic average, your accuracy is better than if you follow the average annual forecast of the top 20 market strategists from the large Wall Street banks. Our ability to predict recessions isn't much better, and since big events come out of nowhere, forecasts may do more harm than good, giving the illusion of predictability. Carl Richards writes, risk is what's left over when you think you've thought of everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy. They're still talking about recessions on the news all the time, and here it is. It's coming soon. And it's like
how long has it been coming?
I mean, and who cares? The truth, a couple things. It doesn't affect your financial plan if you've got a financial plan in place. Mm-hmm. It really doesn't. It does not affect your long-term plan. And everybody knows that you can identify a recession after it's already happened. You've already been through it.
Yeah, you're in it.
It's the fear and the talking about it that's exhausting and not helpful for anybody. And it appears that it's helpful because all the talk show hosts and pundits talk about it.
And because we want to feel like we're in control of it. I know I'm in it.
Yes.
I've predicted it. I've called it. Now I can live through it. But really, that's not what's happening.
When you say control, so page 200, he says, psychologist Philip Tetlock once wrote, we need to believe that we live in a predictable, controllable world, so we turn to authoritative sounding people who promise to satisfy that need. I think you might have already said that earlier. Satisfying that need is a great way to put it. Wanting to believe that we're in control is an emotional itch that needs to be scratched. I think you already said this, right? Rather than an analytical problem to be calculated and solved. The illusion of control is more persuasive than the reality of uncertainty, so we cling to stories about outcomes being in our control.
Yeah, we just want control.
We want to believe that we're in control. So the takeaway here is, we tend to fill in the spaces with stories, and I think it's just helpful for us to be aware of that. And I always teach my kids, you want to be an accurate thinker, right? We don't want to believe sound bites that aren't necessarily true. We want to question why. And so the more we can do that, the better off we are. Anything else from chapter 18 before we move on to chapter 19?
Not for me. Nope. 19's the wrap it all up chapter.
Yeah.
Hey there, this is a quick break to talk about how you pay yourself in retirement. People often ask about how much they're going to be able to spend each month from their savings when they're no longer working. You may have heard of the 4% rule, the bucket strategy, or nameless others, but none of them do a good job measuring your true spending capacity. That is, how much can you afford to spend each month confidently? I wrote a white paper you might want to read. It's about a guardrail system for retirement that can help you do better in retirement. And I think it's probably the best withdrawal strategy available. There's no cost to download and read it. If you want a copy, all you have to do is text the word income to our business line at 214-988-9178. That's it, just the word income, and send it to 214-988-9178, and we'll send that paper about guardrails straight to you.
It's called All Together Now, What We've Learned About the Psychology of Our Own Money.
If you don't want to read the entire book, just read this chapter, chapter 19. It really does a great job at just summing it all up in little tiny tidbits. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, so he introduces it. The concept of all the tidbits we're going to talk about is basically saying that, what's good for one person is not good for everybody. So you got to be careful. And he kind of compares that to surgery and a dentist. I'm trying to remember if you guys can help me remember what it was that he was talking about here.
He performed a surgery on someone that ended up ultimately dying. Mm-hmm.
Well, the doctor, the example.
Yeah, because the patient didn't give consent to what the dentist was doing. This was like
the example was
31 or something.
Well, the example was doctors used to cure. They used to take authority and say, we're going to cure this because it needs to be cured. And that medicine has changed to basically say, well, we have to find out what does the patient want to be cured, right? Mm-hmm. And how does the patient want to deal with it? So doctors changed to where now it's like, okay, let's show you alternatives and let's let you choose your path versus we're the healers. So let's go ahead and just, heal you. And he relates that to financial planning where it's like, you have to basically, as Tori's always saying, not push your objective on people, your opinions on people. You have to basically meet them where they're at, what they want. So what you want may not be what they want, right? And so good financial planners will do that. They'll give them what they want. We always say, if people want a hamburger, don't try to give them a hot dog. Don't try to give them something else. Right. But you got to discover what it is that people really want. And so when he gives the advice here, he kind of preempts it with that, right? Saying that
these are all so good. His highlighted sections are all like
right. I like the one less ego, more wealth. Yeah, and earlier in the book, he talked about the difference between wealth and being rich, and wealth is the money you don't see. Mm-hmm. Wealth is
not the car on social media.
Right. Yeah. Wealth is what's in the bank account, the retirement accounts. Yeah. And riches is the stuff.
Yeah.
the
stuff that makes you compare.
Yes. Nothing wrong with having the stuff, but
there's a difference.
Less ego, more
We have
wealth.
A quote on the wall in the office from Thomas J. Stanley, and it says, I may not wear big hats, but I have a lot of cattle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. What are some of your other favorites, you guys?
I mean, so many of these go back to how we do financial planning. I mean, so many of these are things we've discussed with clients of the manage your money in a way that helps you sleep at night. I mean, that's so big to how we do financial planning because we've said this a million times. I can give you all the numbers,
right? But
if you go to bed terrified of how we are doing it, then it's not meeting your goal. It's not getting you peace of mind.
Course? You won't be able to stay the course if you don't sleep at night, right?
Right.
So that's a conversation around risk capacity versus risk tolerance. Risk capacity is saying, hey, mathematically, you have the capacity to make this work. Risk tolerance is, do you have what it takes to stay the course and enjoy your life with this? Meaning, do you see owning U.S. companies the same way we see owning, meaning that we think that there's that's a stronger way of doing it. But if that drives you crazy, well, then you're going to have to go a different route, right?
Right.
So we had somebody recently that just absolutely didn't want to have any equities in her portfolio at all. And so we said, the truth is we think it's the right way. And if you can't accept a certain amount of risk and volatility, knowing that the system will be managing it for you and everything's okay, then we're going to have to plan for you in a completely different way to where you have a lot of fixed stuff and you're not going to be able to spend as much money, but it's going to be,
What
quote
helps you
unquote
sleep at night,
guaranteed
yeah.
for you across the board. Exactly. So some other ones here are, if you want to be a better investor, the single most powerful thing you can do is increase your time horizon. That also is to help them with their perspective too and say, listen, you're not thinking about things in a 5-year period, right?
Yeah. And are you spending all that money tomorrow? We tell people that all the time. It's okay.
Yeah.
That some of your money does have that time horizon that
Yeah.
you're so worried about.
One of the things that we believe and we tell people is that retirees can be long-term equity investors. They often think, well, I'm retiring now, so I have to become way more conservative. Well, actually, you want that money to produce for you for 20, 25, 30 years, maybe even for your heirs. So your time horizon for most people is a lot longer than you think. Yeah.
Become okay with a lot of things going wrong. Be okay with things going wrong. You can be wrong half the time and still make a fortune. So staying the course, when the news is telling you everything is going to hell, just stay the course. You can be wrong half the time and you'll still be fine.
Another thing is, diversification means you're always apologizing. So if you are diversified and everybody believes you should be diversified, well, that means you're going to be wrong on a lot of things every year.
Yeah.
So you're going to be upset that you owned real estate in years that real estate didn't do as well. You're going to be upset that you owned small cap value when small cap value didn't do as well. Same thing with international. People are like, well, I don't want to own international because it hasn't done well for a long time. Well, if you're not diversified, then you're trying to predict, right? And then that's where you're going to get into problems. So being wrong half the time, you can still make a fortune. That's why you're happy you owned Netflix when Netflix went up so well. You own some of NVIDIA,
But not only NVIDIA.
There's so many people that have made so much money in NVIDIA this year. They're like, well, yeah, but I did really well with NVIDIA. You did until you don't,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Be nicer and less flashy. No one is impressed with your possessions as much as you are. That was the chapter about the guy that had the really fancy car, the Lamborghini or whatever it was. And he was so cool. And people didn't care about him. They were looking at his car. So
be nicer.
Find what matters most to you.
Well, and that goes with not moving the goalpost so much, which is we talked about in other chapters in this series. Some of our people that we're most impressed with are people who have done what another one of this thing says, use money to gain control of your time, meaning they basically kept their lifestyle in check to a certain point to where they could retire earlier. They didn't have to have that next level house. And they were very, very happy at 59 retiring, and they are enjoying the heck out of life. And it's just impossible if you are constantly trying to be more flashy.
Yeah.
What's another one here?
Define the game that you're playing. That was one of the, chapters that we recently talked about, but figure out your game. Don't compare yourself to what the day trader is doing or to what the short-term investor is doing.
Right.
What's your game?
Well, and we've talked about this before because many people come in here and they want to know, how do I have enough? How do I measure up to your normal client? Because we are naturally want to compare. Am I going to be okay? Do I measure up? But you may not be playing the same game. You may have a huge pension in Social Security and you don't need what the next person has. And so you're not playing the same game, same goal.
Right. Yeah, that can be helpful for a lot of people. I like it's a weird way of saying it, but he says worship room for error.
Yeah.
The gap between what could happen in the future and what you need to happen in the future in order to do well is what gives you endurance, and endurance is what makes compounding magic over time. Room for error often looks like a conservative hedge, but if it keeps you in the game, it can pay for itself many times over. People complain about keeping a good emergency savings, a good amount of cash, because, well, it's not earning as much as it could. Now, they're not complaining about it as much right now because, cash is paying a lot better than it used to. But for years, they would complain, you got me in so much cash, emergency savings, and then cash is only paying 1% or whatever. But, the cost of having to finance something, the cost of paying a penalty, that's the opportunity cost you're trying to avoid. Have that room for error. And it's the same thing with your retirement plan. You can be extremely conservative in all of your assumptions. And if you are extremely conservative in all of your assumptions and you can still enjoy and spend more, now you're really going to enjoy and spend more.
Right. Yeah. Any last remarks?
I think the last page, respect them as smart, informed, and reasonable people can disagree in finance because people have vastly different goals and desires. There's no single right answer, just the answer that works for you.
Yeah, I like
No
that.
one is crazy.
No one's crazy.
How the
We
whole
all
book
have
started.
we all have our own set of beliefs and goals and values, and money plays into that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, this has been a great book. Hope you guys enjoyed it.
Yeah, there are so many great takeaways from this book. And so leave a comment. Let us know what your takeaway was from the book. We'd love to hear from you, and share the episode. Someone else might find it helpful as well. Thank you so much for joining us. We truly appreciate you being here, and we look forward to next time. Thanks.
Nick Davis is an investment advisor representative of Brindle Bay Financial Advisors, a registered investment advisor. This show is for informational purposes only. Any references to client experiences made may be deemed to be indirect testimonials. Clients were not compensated for providing any testimonial statements. Any references to client experiences are for illustrative purposes only. Actual client experiences will vary. Any exposure to ideas and financial vehicles discussed should not be considered financial advice or recommendation to buy or sell a financial vehicle. You should consult a qualified financial tax or legal professional before taking any action. This program is not endorsed by the Social Security Administration or any other government agency. Brindle Bay Wealth Management is affiliated with Brindle Bay Financial Advisors.